Just to show the sensitivity here, what we find is that this is data from the US on the cost of broiler production. We find that there's a huge increase in production costs when the US government introduced laws saying that there's a minimum amount of corn that has to go to ethanol production. Okay. Outside the control of the broiler producers, a decision that's made by the government, rightly or wrongly, I think they're starting to wind that back now, realising that it wasn't a sustainable decision, but it's increased the live production costs for those broiler producers. Obviously, the economic downturn, the global financial crisis has had some pretty significant effects on the live production costs. And then, as I said, 2 years ago, the drought, lack of available raw materials drives the costs up. But what's that done? What's our opportunity? What's the answer? Maybe we should be looking at alternatives. Maybe we don't just stick to our traditional, conventional ways of looking at how to raise chickens. Okay? The US are good at that. They've got corn and soy most of the time. Here, okay, we're more fortunate. We've got a lot bigger palette of different raw materials that potentially we could use. So once again, this is data from AgriStats in the US. And what it shows is that as the cost of soybean meal increases, the usage drops. Okay? So as any of the nutritionists would know, when you do a least cost formulation, the higher the cost of your raw material, the less likely it is to be, well, the more likely it is for it to be reduced, or in some cases completely taken out of your formulations. What we find is that, keeping in mind, this was driven, this is around the time towards the second half of these graphs of the drought. So soybean meal prices skyrocketed, and we find that the percentage of complexes that started to use DDGs increased significantly. Okay. And then also the average inclusion of the DDGs in their formulations also increased. So what they're trying to do is mitigate the increased cost of soybean meal. Then we say, well, okay, that happened for a while, but then what happened after 2011? Things dropped down a little bit. Well, yes, they did when it came to DDGs. But what we find then is they also started to look at wheat. So what they've found is by using DDGs, they can still produce chicken meat efficiently, or relatively efficiently. So what they're now doing is, okay, what else have we got available? Let's try wheat. So what they're doing now is that the percentage of complexes using wheat has increased, and okay, the proportion of wheat used in the diet hasn't changed all that much, but overall, there's an increased volume of wheat usage. I find this mildly amusing, to be honest, because in the US, they consider 20% wheat as high risk. They don't like using wheat at high levels. For me, in Australia, sometimes wheat is the only grain we will use in broiler diets. It's either wheat or sorghum for us. We don't use any maize. So I smile quietly to myself when the US say that they don't like wheat and they start having problems at 20%. You know, that's fine because it keeps the wheat with us.